Good morning. This is Cheryl Treadwell from CDSS Foster Care Audits and Rates. I'm the chief of the Foster Care Audits and Rates branch. Welcome to our morning Friday part 3 of the latest updates on the level of care protocol, and today our focus will be on the role of the eligibility worker. So I look forward, and also I will be providing some updates on other items as well. So that's me again, and no matter how hard and how deep stuff gets, we have to push forward and we have to ask, why do we do what we do? And we know it's for the children and the families. This is tough work that we're involved in. Change is hard, and I encourage people to be encouraged and to stay in the game. And you know, as we get through this, the end of the day, the question is, how well are the families and our children getting what they need? So that is really the focus of the work that we're doing. So what I'm going to cover today, as I said, I'm going to provide additional updates and responses to questions that we've been getting since the last webinar, focus on the eligibility worker, and we should have plenty of time for questions and answers. So if you haven't already heard, extra, the counties have another funding option to support children and youth and families that are currently not placed with the foster family agency. So I'm going to let Cheryl Treadwell's alter ego tell you more about that.
Hello, this is Cheryl Treadwell from the Foster Care Audits and Rates branch. I'm here to tell you again, to make an announcement and speak to you real briefly about the services only rate. As you know, we had a work group some time ago, and it was determined that counties needed another funding source of transition kids to home-based family settings. So we established the services only rate specifically for that purpose. What the services only rate is intended to accomplish is to allow counties to, for example, buy additional visits, buy tangible supports for families. You can also use the services only rate to prevent kids from elevating to higher levels of care. So basically, the bottom line is now counties have a rate that can be put in place to provide the kinds of services that kids will need to prevent them from going to higher levels of care, transitions, and the lower levels of care. We think it's a really great opportunity. It's another tool in the rates chest box, along with other rates that we have in order to support families and children. If you need more information, I will refer you to the All-County Letter 18-88, which was issued July 20th, 2018. The rate is effective July 1, 2018. You can also send the email to yes.
Okay, sorry for that little technical difficulty if you weren't able to hear that. But that link to that YouTube video is available on our CCR website. So if you want the information, you can go there, and that's where many of the postings and the short little vignettes that we've been doing have been done. So just a little bit about the services only rate. I just want to remind counties can partner with FFAs and community-based organizations primarily to serve youth placed with relatives, as we said, and other non-FFA families. You can supplement other rates, braid the funding in a way. Use it to buy services. You can even use it as a match if you needed to match, say, for example, against a mental health dollar. You can use it there. But it's individualized to that child and family's needs. It's pretty flexible in terms of how it can be used and in terms of the timing on how it can be used. Counties can memorialize it by using MOUs, contracts, or service placement agreements, even though right now we don't have a services-only placement agreement. If a county has a template that they would like to share, that they are designing, and we had committed to work on something for counties to look at. And we can still do that. Then please feel free to share that with us so we can share it with others. But we do recommend that you have a method to track the purchase of services. There'll be fiscal letters coming out. The claiming letter has already been issued in terms of the amount and how that's going to be allocated. There'll be another letter forthcoming shortly. So in implementation updates, as you know, we're in another delay mode. Our target date is for the next month for September. So it means that we'll continue with FFA new entries, and FFAs have the option to request on a case-by-case basis to counties to do a level of care protocol if youth is presenting with increased needs or to prevent potential placement disruptions, or if issues emerge in the CFT that indicate a need for a rate adjustment. So this is, since March, the new entries have been getting a level of care assessment or protocol. And we have got your letters or emails, and we also have heard from counties that we know that some counties are not doing a lot of LOCs. We are hearing that counties are not doing any LOCs. So I would have you know that we're pulling data out of the system. We are looking at the level of care activity based on what's being inputted into the system. And we have indication that counties are doing LOCs. They may not have done it with your particular agency, but they are being conducted in counties. And we also, we have a regular call with the county directors, and, recently we just met with the deputies. So to the extent that the messaging on the front line is not still getting the workers, and you're having conversations with workers who are saying they either are not trained or they're not doing LOCs, we are fiercely working and providing TA to those counties so that we can understand why that's not occurring. So just want you to know that we are, attentive to your emails that are coming to us around scenarios related to that. And so we're trying to dig into those case-by-case basis to find out if there is either a misunderstanding or if there is something that we can facilitate between the provider and the county when it comes to completing a level of care tool. And so just remember during this phase, as in the previous delays, that the LOC protocol is not applying to other family settings. So for now, that you only apply the basic level rate and an SCI if it's appropriate, and you use the old SCI rate, not the new SCI plans. We don't implement the new SCI plans until we implement the full LOC implementation. So FFAs that don't meet that ACL X 1806 filter or criteria stay on the age-based rate. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. To date, we've received about 45 specialized care plans that we've submitted, and we reviewed those plans. They should be posting on a flow basis on our website. We have five counties that are ending their SCI plans, and as I said, they'll be posted online, the old and the new plan. So we're almost done on some of the tweaks, and the delay primarily is because we were working on some of the items that I have mentioned. Okay. So as I mentioned, there's a how-to guide that we're working on that will have some scenarios. We're still making tweaks to the physical permanency and educational domains for clarity only, because there were some concerns that that if we were making too many changes to the tool, that it might impact SCI plans. The type of tweaks we're making, we do not think will affect the SCI plans. we're working on a decision tree that sort of shows the flow and order of flow that we think should occur with the use of the tool. And once all of these items are done, then the tools will be viewed, those drafts will be viewed by our subject matter reps from counties, providers, and advocates that we have been involved with throughout the process. And if people are, I understand that if there are any people on the line from LA County, if you have peers that are having trouble getting on this webinar because the link is not activated, I think there's something in LA County that they need to address with their tech people to make the link operative, because that's been an ongoing problem. So if there's anybody on LA County that was able to get on, if you can get with your peers to figure out with them how to access this webinar, and it is being recorded. So, as I said, let's talk specifically about eligibility workers, and the items I'm going to try to cover is how it relates to the eligibility process as far as rate determination when it's completed by the social worker and our probation officer. Different rates and dates that impact eligibility with respect to effective start dates. I know that a lot of that information has been articulated in these various ACLs. I'll try to touch on those a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the triggering factors and the distinction about initial entry versus new entry when it applies to the placements with FFAs, and some of the scenarios around what happens when there is change of placements. So I hope to clarify some of those. So I am not an eligibility worker, but I did consult with a few of you in preparation for this call today. So feel free, if throughout the presentation there are things that if they're not correct, then feel free to put it in the chat box and let me know so I can provide clarification. Or I have the capability to open up a mic to someone in the field to make a comment if that's necessary. So we realized as we went through the process that eligibility workers were just as critical to this process as is social workers and the probation officers. So we want to be sure that eligibilities understand that we value their role in that process. They're critical to ensuring that the correct payment is made to resource families. So we can't do it without you, and it's important that the right amounts of money get to our families, our caregivers, and also to our agency providers. So the way it works in our mind is that eligibility workers should verify the SOCH 500 is fully completed. And the SOCH 500 is the scoring sheet, scoring form. I know we mentioned last time that only the digitized form should be used. I haven't checked, but I understood that the manual form was still on the website, but we will be removing that. So we'll double check that for sure, because we don't want people to use the manual form. It will reduce the error rate if you use the digital form. So in terms of verifying what's on that form, at minimum you should check the level of care rate. And I should have brought up a scoring sheet so I could sort of point to the boxes so you can see what I'm talking about. There are boxes on there that indicate the rate amount, and that's pre-calculated once the worker enters the scoring. You should verify if the worker has checked what resources that they use to determine the rate. The date that the LOC was completed is very important. Those are things that need to be on the scoring sheet, because that will, in some scenarios, affect the effective date. That's important. And also based on the date of placement, how it correlates with that date on the scoring sheet. A lot of the effective dates were articulated in ACL 17-11. As I said, you should not be using that manual form. We strongly believe that communication and collaboration between services and eligibility is important at every phase of this once the scoring sheet is completed, especially if there is a question about what was recorded. And I see here I have two. I have the Social 500A and the Social 500. It's the Social 500 that's correct. I think the A is the manualized one. No, I'm talking about the scoring sheet number. I have two numbers on here. So the digital scoring sheet is the one that should be placed in the eligibility record along with the SOC 158. And there was a question around, is that required for the federal audit? So our thinking is if you put those two together, if there is ever a federal audit, or particularly if there's a rate appeal, you have those items together in the folder, and specifically in the eligibility folder, we think makes sense. But that's also left to the discretion of the local counties if you decide you want to place it other places in the case file. But primarily, we are recommending that you put it where your Social 158 is. As I said before, it requires strong collaboration because this is, from my understanding, involves a very different role for the eligibility worker, differently than the way that they have previously operated when they record into the payment system into CMS. When before you only checked an age-based rate, and then you enter that information into the system, and you had the effective date of placement. That was a pretty simple process. So here we're adding some additional steps here in terms of verifying things on that scoring sheet. So what we heard from the field is that some of the eligibility workers have created visual aids or tools or cheat sheets or tip sheets to sort of walk through the process or help them walk through the process of what should be completed when it comes to correlating the tools to the rate. So keep in mind that you have the LOC matrix, which is completed by the worker, and it has the points. That information is translated to the scoring sheet. And what we've heard is that in some cases, the workers have completed the matrix and given the matrix to the eligibility worker to complete the scoring sheet. And if that is occurring, that should not happen unless it's done in some collaborative way that you and the worker are doing that, because to me that's room for error to have the matrix to be handed over to an eligibility worker to complete that scoring sheet. That is not the intended process that we designed it to do, and I think that potentially that would open you up to mistakes. Other few reminders around the triggering events. So during the delay, what we've been saying is that during the delay, the triggered events will apply to on a limited basis to cases depending on when the placements were made and the circumstances. And the whole idea for setting up these distinctions was to allow counties to sort of prioritize cases so that they would not have a floodgate of cases when we started this implementation process and not be able to have the capacity to sort of handle the cases. So what happens to those FFA placements based on what we articulated in ACL 18-06E? So you have a scenario where a child's placed in an FFA in March of 2017. This is a prior case, an existing earlier case of kids already in the system. They're not a new entry. They're not a new entry in the foster care. And they move to another FFA placement with a different FFA agency. That child remains on the age-based rate. The other scenario is a child is placed in an FFA in December, which was our initial implementation date of the tool, and they were a new entry into foster care. So new meaning new into foster care, not new to the FFA. And that child moves to another FFA, and it's with the same agency, and it's the March. It's also in the following year of March of 2018. So the FFA should conduct a request, a CFT, if they're not already doing that. And I'm entering that in there because we're hearing that CFTs are not occurring, so I want to emphasize that we are still expecting counties to do CFTs, but you as the FFA also have a right to request them, not just request an LOC, but request the CFTs too, because those in our mind are where a lot of the information gathering that you need to make some decisions about what services need to occur for not only for the child, but also information you will need to determine the rate. So that, you know, what was the purpose of the move? Was it actually a placement disruption? Did the kids' needs change? Per our ACL, an LOC should be conducted in this scenario. So, you know, what's the difference is that it's basically, as I said, new entry versus existing placement sort of determines the order of priority and urgency. And it's up to who determines that is the social worker, whether to complete that. And it shouldn't be the eligibility worker. That is the social worker or probation officer's role and decision to determine whether to complete that. But I'm hoping the social workers are not doing that in a vacuum, and they're not doing it unilaterally, that there's some considerations for the factors if the kid's in an FFA, that you are talking to the FFA social worker and the resource parent around that piece. Once again, another reminder, as I said, initial/new placement means new to foster care and not new to the FFA. So that has been the language that we've used interchangeably in our letters, and we're using it in the context of a new placement into foster care for this priority of deciding and determining when to use the LOC. As I said, the social worker or the probation officer does the LOC protocol and transfers those scores after completing the matrix and records that on the Social Vital 500. And as I said previously, those two, the 158 and the 500, should go together. And I understand that we're making modifications to that 158 to reflect the LOCs as a drop-down on that fillable document. So, and I'm not sure when that's going to be done, but we are aware that we need to make that change, so that's going to happen. And at the end of the day, all of the final outcome, we should be entering, whoever enters that information into the CMS system, and that may vary in the county, but our assumption is that eligibility workers, since they're entering information from the 158 on new entries, they should be entering this information as well. So, but as I said, local processes may differ in regards to how things are entered in the CMS system. And we know that in some counties that the eligibility function sits in the CalWorks side of the house. And so that is just very imperative that counties remember that they need to train those workers about the level of care protocol tool, and communicating closely with services. So if you're doing training, our recommendation is to do some joint training when it occurs, to include that side of the house during this transition period, so we can avoid mistakes and miscommunication, because we are aware that policy is always changing with CCR, and we've learned what's working is that the more you communicate, the better you are in terms of your outcomes and in terms of how this process is working. So that's really basically some of the updates. You know how to contact us. You have communications that we still owe the field. You've been hearing from Sarah. Others have been hearing from Sarah about, we've been working on the group home extensions, county transition plans for kids that are in group homes and how they'll be transitioned. As I said, there'll be a SCI and services only fiscal letters to follow. I think our shop is working on an ACL, on EA guidance regarding the long-term funding related to the bill that just passed. We're convening an ISSC Intensive Services Care Work Group. There's CANS training that's coming forward for counties. So as usual, we are just busy and trying to supply the information that you need in the field to work. And in terms of the whole FFA issue about whether kids should get an LOC or not, I just want to say, if you really are out, if you're having a good relationship, you should be having a good relationship with the county social worker. And to me, use some discretion in terms of, when I say discretion, counties in discussion with FFAs about what triggers an LOC, what makes sense. If you think that that's a need to do, then do the LOC protocol. That is just, we don't want to be so stringent on this piece, but our standard policy is we try to establish things so it's standardized, but you get in the room, I mean, it's not like we're going to come in and point our finger at you and tell you not to do that. We are aware that in some of the smaller counties that don't have FFAs, so they're not doing LOCs right now because they don't have the FFAs. So they only will be doing basic and doing their SCI plans. So I just heard that recently from smaller counties, and I'm not sure that they understood that they should not be using their new SCI rates on the basic LOC tool. So I've tried to be committed to, when I'm getting emails directly or when my staff sends those emails to us, I've tried to commit to getting a response back to you as soon as we can. We are working to finalize the Q&A that we did take down from the CCR website, so we can get that back up to you in case you need to come back to something that was said earlier or today. And once again, this webinar will be posted as soon as it comes up, and you will be able to access this later. So I'll pause right now to see if there are any questions.
Yes, so we have 3 questions, and one of the questions is, will the changes being made to the SOC 158A reflect in CWS? The stock 158 is auto-populated in CWS.
Yes.
So
Yes.
So John, you want to answer that question?
Well, the form is housed in CWS CMS, so yes, when we make changes to the form, it will be reflected in CWS CMS, so that counties will be able to enter a level of care rate.
okay. Next question, is there a form to communicate static criteria?
So that was something that we identified. So the SOC 158 has on there, not 158, I'm sorry, the scoring sheet has a box that indicates if you're using static criteria. What we don't have is a way to indicate that into CMS. So counties are always very smart, so what they do, what I've seen is that if they are using static criteria, they are indicating that in the ISFC level, and they're labeling it as a static ISFC. So that's the way it's sort of been indicated in the system. So we will either need to figure out how to either adjust for that or in the CMS system, but it is on the form. So you do have a box to check if you're using the static criteria right now. We need to change the form to allow for a leveling up for that and for the static criteria. All of that's been modified so that you can indicate on the scoring sheet that you're using the static criteria.
Next question, will the services only rate be paid off the foster care case?
So the services only rate is not part of the basic foster care rate that will be paid to a resource family. That is the services only rate is a separate rate to secure additional services and supports from the FFA or a community-based organization.
Okay. Next question, you mentioned the SCI approved plans will be posted. Where will it be posted specifically?
So what we're going to do is put a link on the CCR web page, so it'll be linked to our foster care rates SCI place, because we understand that right now in our regular foster care web page, sometimes it's hard to find those plans. So we're going to post a link on CCR's website so that you can it'll take you straight to where you need to go to find the plan. And so I don't know if that's been done yet. So after the call, I'll have to check to find that out. But if you're interested in a particular county's plan, you can also send it through the email box, and we can share that information with you. So
please repeat again how counties are entering the ISFC into CMS. Will the changes being made? Oh, that's it. I'm sorry. So please repeat again how counties are entering the ISFC into CMS.
So you have all of the levels are in CMS. You have levels 1 through 4, and then you have the ISFC level that's in there as a level itself. So they choose ISFC. So that's what they should. It's a drop down, and they should select the right level that comes off of the scoring sheet. So if you're not seeing that in the system, then let us know. But our research people pull the data, so those levels are in the system. So I'm not sure if that's an eligibility person asking that question or if it's a county person asking that question. Oh, so is that you? If it's Joanne, you might need to say more about your question. Maybe there's something behind that we need to know with respect to the CMS. So if you need to do that, we can unmute your mic if you want to comment about your question about where it is in the CMS system.
Until we get a reply back on that. So what do eligibility workers need to verify on the scoring form?
So I mentioned some basic things that I thought were important, like the date the LOC was completed, making sure it's signed, making sure that the boxes are checked for what the worker relied on to complete the tool, making sure that there is an actual rate in there, but it should be. If they're using a digital form, it shouldn't be blank. And those are the basic things. The other information is, the stuff you normally would have on kids, their case numbers, name, those kinds of things. And I understand that some counties added other things to the form which we permitted them to do for tracking purposes. So I wouldn't expect you to go and second guess a rate determination behind what a worker selected. That is not what I think an eligibility person's role would be. So if there's some county that's doing it very different with respect to whether or not you're determining if the worker followed the rules, then we need to understand more about that. At this point, we are not expecting you to do that level of detail or involvement about second guessing whether they selected the right rate or not.
So Joanne has indicated that she's gotten her answer, thank you.
Oh, okay.
And another question, excuse me, I'm not sure eligibility can image the SOC 500, the SOC 500 in our C4 system.
Okay.
It has medical information that is to be confidential. Something to think about again.
So imaging the SOC form in the C4 system, I'm not sure I understand that piece, and what you mean by that, whoever asked that question. So explain more. So medical information there's no medical information on the scoring sheet. So if you think there is, there isn't. If you're thinking about the matrix, that may be different, but the matrix doesn't have medical information on it either. It just has expectations that the resource parents are doing, and it doesn't have anything specifically to me that would say is confidential information. Because of all of this information, if it's requested by a judge in a hearing or even the FFA, our opinion is that information can be shared, because the rate determination tool is not an assessment tool. It shouldn't have assessment information in it that's private, and as opposed to what's being used for mental health assessment or some of the other kind of health-related assessment types of tools. This matrix is not that type of tool.
So can the rate be approved through the static criteria while LOC is not fully implemented?
So that tells me this. So the way the static works is those indicators are the list of kids that, for example, if you have a fire setter and you feel that that's an issue for placement and it occurred within the last 12 months, then you could use a static. But if you have enough information on that child, you don't have to go static. You could go straight to the LOC and do the tool. So it's one or the other. It's not static and LOC. The whole idea for static was to think about those children or youth that we knew just on a cursory or surveillance type of level, we knew that they have high needs. We had information on them that they had high needs based on that list, and you can make that placement on a short-term basis, and pay that rate on a short-term basis while you made that decision if that was going to be a continuing behavior, or if other supports that could be put in that home, if that continues to be the placement that will support that kid, then you got enough information at the end of that 160-day period or 120-day period, then you conduct a level of care. But you don't, I just want to emphasize you don't have to go static. It's not automatic static just because you have indicators there. If you got enough information on the child to do an LOC, do the LOC. And also if you have a placement, do the LOC. So that is one myth I want to clear up, and it's just like we're not going to keep adding a list of these behaviors to the static so that folks could just say, hey, I have high needs kids that have this one thing. We were just trying to be thoughtful about the fact that we do have kids that have those presenting indicators and factors, and we just need for counties to use other information to make some assessments about, what else is needed to stabilize that child in a placement. And so that's why we have the time limited 60 to 120 days to do that. And you don't have to wait that full time to do it. If you get the information on the 30th day, do the LOC. So it just depends on the individualized kid's needs and what you need to do to make the determination.
So does a score of 7 in either behavior or health domain automatically qualify for ISFC rate?
Yes, that policy is still in effect until we determine whether the tool is performing the way it should be. So what we're doing right now is we're pulling cases where an ISFC level has been determined, and we're actually pulling those cases right now to look at those kids. We realize that right now the automatic 7 policy was to respond to what we were hearing, that kids were not getting there based on the points with the use of the tool. They weren't getting to the ISFC level. So we want to look at those ISFC kids to see if that is the case, keeping in mind that part of that case review will also tell us if there are training issues about how folks understand the tool, and you know that right now that interim policy of leveling up, it was not intended to be permanent. It's interim for now. And then we think at the end of this, our case review period, we'll have a better understanding about that group and how the tool responds. So right now, yes, if you get a 7 in the behavioral or the health, you go to an ISFC rate, basically. That's what it's saying.
For clarification, are we able to make a static placement in a county home? Also, it is our understanding we are not supposed to reduce any rates.
So making a static placement in a county home. So when you make a placement in a county home, which is a foster home, you will be using your, and it's not an FFA, so you'll be using whatever the basic rate would be in and plus an SCI on your own SCI system. You wouldn't be doing a level of care because that's a county home. They're not FFA homes, so you would not be doing a level of care. You wouldn't be using static because we're not applying the LOC to county homes, relative homes. So
I think they're
so talking about making a static placement in county home. That's not
paying ISFC.
You would not be doing that because you could have a kid that has those indicators, but you do what you do now for those placements. You have the basic level rate and you trigger your OSCI for that. So, or if you have an ITFC provider who is an ISFC provider, we allowed back in December for you to make new placements into those provider homes. And that is outside of the LOC system at this point. So, I mean, that is what we had allowed back in December.
Would eligibility need to verify if the home is licensed for ISFC, if the tool states to pay ISFC rates?
So I would say no, that would not be the, so let me ask this question. When kids are placed in group care, you basically go and look and see if that's an active listing, if they have an active rate. If you want to know if that's an ISFC home, we are listing those programs on the website. So if you need to verify that, then it is verifiable. But you need to read the letter about the various ways that you can pay an ISFC rate. So there's various ways to pay an ISFC rate to an FFA, and also to a FFA home who doesn't have an ISFC program. There's a criteria for that. If they have one home that they're developing for that child because that placement was identified, then we are allowing you to place in that home under that urgent placement criteria while that FFA home parent gets up to the competency level, meet the training requirements to serve that youth. But you need to be really clear when you're making those placements with those FFAs on that.
Please repeat again if LOC is only applied if an FFA requests, only if an FFA requests it. What is that effective placement start date into the FFA? Is it cases with an effective start date of March 2018?
So say that, repeat the question one more time
Okay.
for me.
Please repeat again if an LOC is only applied if an FFA requests it.
Well, the LOC is not only applied if they request it. That's one way to get it, because you can get an LOC if it's a new entry. So, but if the FFA requested or the worker determines that the child needs it because there's emerging needs or increased needs, then an LOC can deduct it in. So you're asking about when would the effective date be?
So
And
what
be
is
the
that
initial
effective?
date when they complete the LOC.
Right.
And it'll be back to that placement date.
The date the LOC rate determination is completed would be the date of the effective date of the new rate.
Correct.
You're not going to have.
I didn't say that correctly. So say that again.
So let me repeat. So it says, what is that effective placement start date into the FFA? Is it cases with an effective start date of March 2018?
Oh, so is that a question sort of alluding to back? Is it retro back to March 18 if that placement was in there?
So for
they did a LOC for the kids that came in March 1. When does it go back to? Is the date of the requested, or is it back to the March 1/18 date for the implementation? And I think it's the date of the.
Should be the date of the placement. If it's a new case that came in in March of 2018 and the LOC rate determination is conducted, the rate is effective at the date of the placement.
So if it was March 1, it would be March.
Okay. To confirm, when an LOC is being conducted for a new entry into an FFA as of March 2018, the CFT has been completed and gathered all the information needed. The LOC is determined to be ISFC. Then this is retro back to placement, correct?
Yes. If it's a new case, yes.
Yep.
New entry.
So it sounds like we have completed most of our questions. So those are really great questions. So if you have more to send to us after this presentation, then please let us know, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you guys for joining us this morning, and I'm going to give you some time back, and happy Friday.